Hi, my name is Ophi YouTube Videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian. I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things, and this one is brought to you by my good friends at Balesa. We're doing another giveaway, and everybody who signs up using the link in my description will receive a free rose suction toy with your order, but more about that in just a moment, because there is something else that I'd like to disclose before we really get this video started, which is that in the summer of 2019, during the lead up to Taylor Swift's Lover album, I was fully convinced that that woman intended on coming out as bisexual. In my defense, this was a very different time. Taylor spent a lot of time during that summer hanging out around drag queens or queer celebrities like the ones she had in her You Need to Calm Down music video, all of whom apparently didn't have any objections to her setting herself up as the sheriff of a gay trailer park. Think pieces abounded, criticizing her for making Pride Month about herself, questioning the worth and sincerity of performative allyship by celebrities who we assume to be straight. And though it felt like it at the time, because for some reason every time there is gaylor discourse, we do Eternal Sunshine and pretend like we've never heard of it before, that was not the first time that there had been media speculation about Taylor Swift and potential queerness. You might remember this, though, especially if you cared enough to click on a video with this title. There had been tabloid speculation about Taylor Swift being queer all the way back in 2014, when a video of Taylor Swift and Karlie Kloss hanging all over each other at a 1989 concert was widely speculated on as if it were a video of them making out. And that's just what made it into the mainstream. There was speculation even earlier than that, happening in comment sections and on gossip forums, and based off of early career photos like the gay Texan picture that I guess makes complete sense for a heterosexual woman and her friends to think is funny if you're really, really bought into that narrative. And I know that a lot of people are very bought into the heterosexual Taylor narrative. This is on purpose. From early on in Taylor Swift's career, her attachment to men, other famous people who she would just so happen to take a nice walk with near the paparazzi, has served as both a way for Taylor's star to rise and also as a sort of marketing for her albums. What I'm telling you right now is not that I think that all of her relationships have been PR beard contracts, but I'm saying, even if you don't know a ton about Taylor Swift, I think a lot of people are aware of the prevailing theory around many of the songs from the album Red, including the one she made the 10-minute short film music video to with Dylan O'Brien and Sadie Sink, is about Jake Gyllenhaal. Like, people know that. You might also have dim memories of Back to December, which you definitely heard on the radio all the time, and speculation that it was about Taylor Lautner. And I don't think I remember any of the people who got invested in that, or indeed any of the people who are very, very invested in her engagement and recent proposal, which we will be getting to, getting flack for being parasocial, invasive, and inappropriate when they engaged with that. Not as a baseline, at least, not until they started doing things like open letters to tell her who to break up with or speculate on her being pregnant. So I'm going to ask you to consider something. Even if you are super anti-gaylor and you're going to ignore everything else I say in this video, I am right about at least one thing here. There has very much never been a cultural agreement that to speculate about Taylor Swift's dating life is wrong. I'm not going to ask you to come away from this video agreeing with me that she's no less likely to be queer than anybody else is, but I am going to ask you to consider that maybe punishment for being parasocial is doled out a bit more harshly, particularly toward the queer fans of Taylor Swift. And I want you to consider that part of my perspective coming at this isn't actually that I think Taylor Swift is going to come out as some secret lesbian doing a grand plan. It's just that I think there is some real homophobia at play in a way a lot of the people who enjoy reading a queer narrative into Taylor Swift's work get treated by the larger fan base. So, buckle in, because I have brought one of my very favorite guests back to the Nuance Corner, another feminist lesbian who has written very recently in defense of gaylors in an article I was honored to be quoted in, Kat Tenbarge. We're going to talk about Taylor Swift, we're going to talk about compulsory heterosexuality, the queering of narratives, lesbian loneliness, and also the mountain goats. This one got a little bit away from me. Before we get into any of that, though, I would love to thank the sponsor of today's video, my good friends at Balesa. If you've been here in the Nuance Corner for a while, then you already know how much I love Balesa. They're a bi-woman company for all things sexual wellness with a mission to empower everyone to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality, which I think makes them a perfect fit not just for this channel in general, but specifically for this video. So I'd like to tell you about some of my favorite toys they've sent me. First of all, this is the one we're giving away, and one of my favorites, the Rose toy. This one has gone viral on TikTok for good reason. It has 10 different modes and fits right in the palm of your hand to provide you with complete control of your pleasure. It's also cute and discreet, and also Look at her. She literally looks like a rose. She's so cute, and she can be yours with any purchase. Like, for example, if you purchased the Pebble. This one has both suction and vibration, both controlled independently, and it is ergonomically built to fit perfectly in your hand. It honestly really just feels nice to hold. What's even nicer than that, though, is that there are no annoying pattern modes, which is one of the things that makes it real obvious that Bellesa is a bi-woman company. I can't believe how many vibrators I owned before I found someone who didn't want to waste my time with a bunch of annoying settings I would never use. You also wouldn't have to worry about annoying pattern modes if you order the Air Vibe, which gives you dual G-spot and clit stimulation and comes in the cutest and most discreet casing. Look at this. It's waterproof, it's rechargeable, and it is so quiet, especially for how strong this thing is. Or you might want to go with my personal favorite, not just out of the lot, but out of the, again, many, many vibrators I have owned, the Thump. This one does it all. It vibrates, it suctions, and it thumps. This one was designed to be the de facto replacement for all external clit-stimulating vibes, and it uses Bellesa's improved pleasure jet technology. Like the other toys, you can control each function independently, and they work really well together if you feel like getting fancy. My favorite feature, though, is the innovative thump technology. I've never had or even seen another toy that does this, but the back of this pop grip here gives you these really natural, but also really strong palpitations. I just really, really like this one. The shape of it also feels great in my hand. It is waterproof and USB rechargeable and made from premium quality silicone, like all of Bellesa's toys. And look how cute and discreet this case is. You could totally be hiding glasses in here. Nobody would even know. But I would. I love Bellesa, and I am so excited to be partnering with them again. If any of what I've just told you about sounds like fun to you, I'm sure you would love them too. You can check out the link in my description to sign up for our giveaway, where everybody will receive a free rose toy just like this one with their order. Thank you so much to Bellesa for sponsoring this video and so many others on the channel. Let's get back to the Taylor Swift of it all. Alright, so off the bat, and despite the fact that I could do this, this will not be a video where I go era by era pointing out references and lyrics in Taylor Swift's work that I think lend themselves particularly well to a queer narrative. I did make a video when I was very new to making videos where I talked about how rife her Reputation era is for sapphic subversion. And Kat has also written previously about sapphic interpretations of Taylor Swift's work. There is quite a lot if you dig deep in the songs themselves, and a lot of people who are not interested in digging deep are very interested in pretending like they have dug deep and found nothing, and I do find that a bit insulting, honestly. Even besides a strictly lyrical analysis, there is quite a bit there if you're remotely curious and willing to actually dig through the analysis happening rather than just gawk at the people you're being told to laugh at. There are a lot of examples I could use for this, but I want to talk about Taylor's references all the way back during the Reputation era to Loie Fuller, who was a dancer. A surface-level analysis of these references begins and ends at Loie Fuller having a serpentine dance, and the imagery for Reputation being so snake-heavy. But then, you can go a little bit deeper with it. On stage during the song Dress, the screens dedicated the performance to Loie and described her as a pioneer in the arts, dance, and design, and who fought for artists to own their own work. So yes, the surface level connection, the Snakegate connection, and also, if you've watched my most recent video about Taylor Swift, you know that wanting to own her own work is something that has been a driving motivation for Taylor Swift for many years now, before the general public even knew about it. This tour happened months before she left Big Machine, years before anyone knew about her master's heist. And okay, whoa, that's kind of cool, right? It's something she references that works on a surface level, but also pulls your attention to a figure in history she's interested in and tells you a little bit about what she's going through. And what song is this during? Because if it's already a couple levels deep, maybe there's another one. And then the song it's during is extremely gay. It's during Dress. Carve your name into my bedpost because I don't want you like a best friend. Only bought this dress so you could take it off. Dress. Could that have anything to do with it, maybe? Well, no. Not if you're somebody who feels very clever for saying she's the straightest woman on the planet. But you could dig a little bit more into Loie Fuller, and you could learn that this woman Taylor is referencing and dedicating this gay-ass song to was a lesbian. And that's really cool. And how much more of a stretch is that, really, than that the reference to somebody fighting for artists to own their own work would be a surprise tool to help us later? A thing I think gets purposefully overlooked in a lot of the discussion around Gaylorism is that Taylor Swift herself encourages a close reading of her work. Do I think some people take it too far? Yeah, absolutely. But Taylor does plant Easter eggs in her music video, does flash a peace sign to indicate a double album, does encourage this culture in her fandom. Much like the speculation on her relationships and the feeling of investment in this girl next door brings you along on her dating adventures branding from her early career, this Easter egg thing is an intentional part of her branding and her appeal. So again, we have a thing that a lot of people participate in culturally as part of their enjoyment of Taylor Swift. This uncovering of Easter eggs, this solving of puzzles, this figuring out of references, but it is particularly demonized when it comes to queer people doing it. Also, yes, we've all seen some of the laughing stocks, at least a few of whom I think are actually just people venting a desire to be annoying online and doing it as a homophobic joke. They're pretending to be some obnoxious straw queer person and enjoying the conflict they farm from that. A lot of tweets I see circulated as, oh my god, look how crazy the gaylors are bait, are in fact not from gaylors, but from accounts who speak in other posts under the same name about how much they hate gaylors, or from throwaway Reddit accounts speaking in clear hyperbole on a subreddit that got so brigaded after the engagement announcement that it had to go private, and nobody bothered to question the authenticity of the post they were giggling over because they wanted to crack jokes about how it would be really funny to do a 5150 on the poster. I guess involuntary institutionalization is a really fun joke in the anti-gaylor crowd. I don't really get that one personally. Every time I check in, they're saying some worse shit over there. Like, when they all started saying meth math, I thought we were reaching critical mass, be it I give it, like, 6 months until they find some cutesy way to say lesbophobic slurs. Like, I bet that there is some heinous emoji replacement word cooking as we speak. Of course, I'm not dismissing the fact that some people into these theories take it too far, but I am reminding you, they do that about the straight stuff too. They did it about her relationship with Harry Styles, they have been doing it about her relationship with Football Man, and continue to do it. There are theories floating around about the next album being the last specifically so that she can settle down and have babies. And I don't think that's a less far-fetched theory than theories that she might be bisexual or that some of her songs might be about women. I think it's just a more culturally accepted theory. I've seen no rash of YouTube videos laughing at people who were insisting Travis and Taylor were secretly married. In fact, outside of Gaylor spaces, I see very little discussion about how honestly it's sort of odd the whole Travis and Taylor of it all is and has been since it started. Here's the thing about this video. I know we're already like 15 minutes in or whatever, but I do want to set some rails up for what I'm even interested in discussing. Despite my earlier admission that I once believed Taylor Swift intended on coming out as bisexual, I am not going to spend this video telling you all of the reasons that I believed that. I'm also not going to go through particular relationships that she's had with women that received speculation, and I would have loved for this video to get to focus less on her relationships, but they are unfortunately front and center of many discussions around Taylor Swift right now, because I am recording this video within just a month of her becoming engaged to Football Man. In my really early videos about Taylor Swift, I had a running joke where I was calling all of her boyfriends Josh interchangeably and just letting you identify which one I meant by the correct last name, but I'm not sure that was really understandable as a bit, and I really didn't feel like committing to it in this one. But the reason for that bit was because I don't really give a shit about Taylor Swift's romantic attachments. As I've mentioned, they've been a huge part of her branding, almost increasingly so to a level we haven't ever seen before, despite my earlier examples in her career in recent years. And with the two most recent known boyfriends, it has been getting weird, and I have not cared about it very much. I think men get a weird amount of centering in Taylor Swift's work culturally. A friend of mine pointed as much out while I was working on this before I even said so. Said he knows more about Taylor's romantic history than he does about her work, as somebody who doesn't connect with her music but exists in the same culture we all do, where she's always very much in zeitgeist and has been for decades at this point. I would have preferred to never have had to speak about the football man, but that's not the timeline we live in. The current and fervent anti-Gaylor backlash might be telling you that it is in response to some nebulous Gaylor crashout, but I think it's specifically something that is reactionary to this engagement itself, to the feeling many anti-Gaylors have that they have been proven right by this engagement. And I find this a troubling thing to get self-righteous about. Do we actually agree that to be engaged to a man precludes the possibility of bisexuality? I've seen quite a bit of, she's straight until she tells us otherwise, which is being said like it's some progressive thing, often by queer people who want to make it clear that they're not the wrong, greedy, speculating, annoying kind of queer person, but I don't think that that's exactly right. I don't live in a world where I presume most people I interact with are heterosexual until they give me some grand coming out speech. I think to reinforce that expectation, even just casually with this sort of rhetoric, is something that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't think everybody should be assumed to be straight until they're proven queer. I don't think that gets me any closer to the kind of world I want to live in. And when I hear that repeated back to me as the company line by other people who went through the process of realizing they were queer, I have to wonder why they're so comfortable playing into the exact things that can make that a difficult realization for people to come to. What I want to try to do in this video is not to talk anybody into believing in some conspiracy, not to say that I think Taylor Swift has any sort of obligation to come out or that I believe she is going to, and not to even imply that I know what her orientation really is. I just want to say, hey, nobody else does either. I think that there are far more interesting conversations to be had about Gaylorism than just to point and laugh at the people you're being told to laugh at. And there is nobody who I would like to have those more interesting conversations with more than my friend Kat Tenbarge. Welcome back. I am always so stoked to have you here. I know my audience is very familiar with you because whenever I post a video with you, they're all very excited. And
Oh,
as I said in the part that I already recorded, there is literally nobody else who I would rather talk about all of this with. So I'm very excited. Welcome back.
thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. We've been talking about Gaylor for longer than a lot of people have even known what Gaylor is. So this is a very full circle moment. So for me, I think I first became aware of Gaylor when I was a freshman in college, which was when 1989 was at its peak, and I was very active on Tumblr. I was not really in Swifty Tumblr or Swifty fandom. I was in like Super Hulock fandom. But as we will likely get into, there was also a lot of this kind of similar stuff happening there as well. And so I was very familiar with gay conspiracy and gay fandom conspiracy and sort of both the real life aspect of like One Direction and Larry, I was very familiar with. And I was also very involved in like fan fiction and shipping culture. And there was an edge of conspiracy to much of that as well. So I was pretty immersed in this world when Gaylor first came onto my radar. And that was mainly due to the speculation around her relationship with Carly Kloss. And I, at that point in time, as did all my friends in college who were just like normal Swifties, we all believed that that relationship was real. We all believed that Taylor Swift and Carly Kloss were actually in some sort of like semi-secret relationship because that was a very widespread belief at that point in time. And so in the years since then, in the decades since then, like my fandom of Taylor has stayed pretty strong. I went to like the Eras tour. I listened to Taylor Swift a lot. Um, but I feel like my relationship with Gaylor sort of waned in that it wasn't that I no longer like reneged on any of those beliefs, but I just didn't matter to me as much anymore. And I also looked at Taylor through a more like personal lens. So like when Folklore came out, I wrote an article at the time for Business Insider. It was like a review almost where I wrote about how like the lyrics related, I related to the lyrics as a queer woman, and lyrics in Folklore to me spoke to the experience of being like a closeted young queer girl or woman. And then in more recent years, as Gaylor has really blown up, I've become very fascinated by it, and I've written about it, and I've spoken to a lot of people in the community. And my sort of feelings on Gaylor, like it almost depends on the day. Some days I'm like, I don't really believe it, but I have a lot of like sympathy and like just like fraternity almost with the community. And then other days I'm like, well, maybe maybe this song is about Carly Kloss, because what else could it be about?
Right. Yes. Yeah, no, I relate to that so much. I go back and forth so much between like, okay, fine. So what if I am reading too much into it? And then like, okay, but this can't all be on accident. Like
Right.
there's just so many things. 1989, that's a bit earlier. I was not exposed to this until we were like in that post reputation lull.
Mhm.
So by the time Lover started and then the Lover rollout was all like rainbows and stuff, I was so convinced. I was so
Yeah.
convinced. I was like, this is happening.
And I feel like that to me, that was one of the biggest inflection points in Gaylor history. And at that point in time, I actually I remember some Swifties got mad at me for a piece I did at BI. And I was assigned to write this. So it was not like it was not a pitch of mine. It was not an idea that came from me. My editor was like, "Can you write a piece about how people think Taylor Swift is queer baiting?" And people got mad at me, and it was not like a huge viral piece or anything, but it was like the reason why I was assigned to write about it was because so many people, and again, mainstream media outlets and like people from all walks of life and Swifties and non-Swifties were speculating that Taylor was going to come out because the Lover era and all of the symbolism within it suggested that she would. Mhm.
A lot of the marketing around that album in particular was just so queer coded, which feels absurd compared to what
Mhm.
we currently see around Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is actually kind of like the first thing that I wanted to talk about here is this like dominant and overbearing heteronormative narrative that we are constantly being fed about Taylor Swift.
It is so overwhelming. It's like it is the way that Taylor's relationship with Travis Kelce is portrayed is like the living embodiment of that old meme where that woman tweeted, I think very like straightforwardly, she was not being sarcastic, but she was like 10 years from now you're going to wake up on it's Super Bowl day, you've got a crock pot of buffalo chicken dip, your husband comes up and like slaps you on the butt, your kids are cheering in the other room, like life is amazing. And people have like memed on that for years now. And that is how Taylor Swift's relationship is like being presented to the world and sort of like understood by the world is just the most bland, like stereotypical middle class American version of like heteronormativity, basically.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that tweet in a long time. You're so right. It's really exactly that.
And it's fascinating because, like, obviously, nobody thinks that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are middle class by any means. Like, everyone knows at this point that they're two of the wealthiest people on the planet, literally. And like the private jet usage and like all of these other elements of their personalities stand at odds to that. But the aesthetic that they are hitting is the one that specifically speaks to like middle class white bread America because it's like even down to like the clothes that they wear and just like the aesthetic of football, red Solo cups, like country music, Tennessee. It's to me, it feels like a grown up version of like kind of the Taylor Swift we heard on debut and Fearless. But even like the Taylor Swift on debut and Fearless was like, I'm gonna get out of this town. Like, I'm not like all these other people. I'm a country girl, but like, I want more out of my life. So it's actually almost a rejection of some of the earlier things she was saying in her life and career.
So we have this new boyfriend, like you said, it's all very football, and he attended the Eras tour, as over 10 million people did. He spoke later on his podcast with his brother about how he was like romantically interested in Taylor, saying that he tried to give her a friendship bracelet with his phone number on it, which like he didn't succeed at giving her at the time, but this like public declaration of interest and kind of courtship really sparked. So the show he sees is in July, and by September, Taylor Swift is attending NFL games all the time, just like
Mhm.
constantly. The relationship has been everywhere since that happened.
And it feels like such whiplash because not that long ago, Taylor Swift was in this long-term relationship with Joe Alwyn that was so private. And then in between Joe and Travis, lest we forget, was the Maddie Healy brief rebound that was so emotionally intense that she's written no less than what, like 26 songs about it. And I've listened to each of them like 100 times.
Right.
So I'm like, it honestly, it boggles my mind how fast Taylor went between these three, and I don't mean that in a judgy way, but it's fascinating, like looking at sort of the public perception of like Travis was immediately endgame, or a lot of people felt that way about him. And like as of right now, they're getting married. So they have taken the most commitment, the biggest step out of any of her relationships. But it was always kind of fascinating to me because as I was listening to Tortured Poets Department in the years following its release, I was just like, it's really hard to square what she's saying on these songs with the fairy tale Disney, literally Disney romance that is like supposedly happening in front of my very eyes.
I didn't know Travis Kelce by name prior to this relationship starting, which I'm pretty sure was the case for most people, right?
If I saw him walking down the street, I wouldn't say a thing. I understand that football is quite popular as a pastime. I understand that sports, generally speaking, are quite popular, but it's the exact opposite of my world. I had no clue who that man was.
Yeah, me neither. We have this podcast he's been doing with his brother, but also my understanding is that he had some sort of like bachelor reality show where he was like trying to date somebody, and that was all also prior to this.
I always forget about that. And then I'm reminded of it. And I'm like, who was the target audience for this show? Who watched this? It's shocking to me.
I think, you know, that's one of many reasons why I can't find it in me to fault people too much who looked at the beginning of this relationship and the way it was being pressed and they were just like, yeah, that's PR. Like
Right.
that was a mutually beneficial agreement. She was looking for a boyfriend, he was looking for a girlfriend.
So many people thought that. And as with like many things in Taylor universe, there's like fairness and unfairness to it. I, for one, was just like, I remember people did a fake. There as there always was with Taylor. People made like fake contracts and like leaked like the fake like dating contract for them. That stuff I thought was ridiculous. However, I did think that it was undeniable that this was mutually beneficial for them and their brands in a way where it's like that doesn't mean they don't love each other. It's just a fact. It's like sometimes you are in like some relationships are convenient for the people in them for that reason. Like you could say the same thing about like royals or like high ranking families or like Kardashians. Like you reach this level of fame
Beyonce
and
and her
celebrity.
husband.
Exactly. Like oftentimes this angle or element plays into it. And it always like, I just have never, even though I am a big fan of Taylor's, for me, my fandom of her never extended into Travis's in the way that it did for a lot of other people in the Swiftie fandom. Famously, Swifties were watching football for the first time, learning how football worked, buying football jerseys, going to football games. The amount of money this made the NFL and the things that this did for the image of the NFL. And I don't like football, but I also hate these institutions. Like athletic institutions are genuinely unethical, bad, criminal, whatever. So it's like that disturbed me to some degree. Although it's not Taylor's fault, I was just like, it's wild how it's almost like pink washing the sport of football, not to mention the way that concussions and like how damaging football is. But I digress. It was just like so many people in the Swiftie fandom started listening to In the Heights podcast, like being a fan of the Kelsey family. It blew up their family as like a unit, and all of them have their brands too. It's like this is like the for Taylor Swift, this is her first time dating a podcaster, now marrying a podcaster. And it brought her into the world of new media and podcasts in a way that was also very, as we saw with the episode that she did, that was huge for her. So I feel like the new media like demographics of it all is very fascinating too.
The album announcement happening on a podcast, like I still really can't get over that. Obviously it was like the most beneficial thing she could possibly do for that guy's podcast. I'm pretty sure that that's like not only their most viewed podcast ever, but like one of the most viewed podcasts ever.
Yes.
That was like an enormous, like in my opinion, that was an enormous favor that she did to this guy to announce her album on his podcast.
Yes, absolutely. And I refused, like, not even out of like I'm making a stance out of this. I just was like, you cannot get me to listen to this podcast. I don't care what you do. I will not listen to this man's podcast. So I was just, and I just was like, I don't know. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. It just, for me, I was like, it feels kind of crass to announce this album on this podcast. I was like, that's fine if that's how you want to do it, but where's the taste? It's like, it's kind of like, it's the opposite of like a gay or queer aesthetic to like announce your album on a football NFL brother podcast.
Yeah, we really need to figure out what the opposite of camp is because that's what she's leaning into. I think that we kind of see her centering herself and, as you said, like bringing her audience to this new guy. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, maybe Taylor is somehow getting new fans from the NFL, but I feel like what you said, she's mostly providing image rehabilitation to like this very male-dominated organization. She's mostly saying, look, this is a nice thing you can do with your daughter. I'm here too, which isn't her fault. She's showing up and they're going to show her, but like, I just have to feel like there's some kind of deal going on there with her in the NFL.
It is like it's so convenient for them. And I feel like this speaks to something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is like Taylor Swift she stands alone in terms of just like the magnitude of her audience is incomprehensible. Like in 2023, I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was something like one out of every 800 audio streams was a Taylor Swift
That's
song.
crazy.
And I think it was actually more than that, but I'm giving it a lot of room because I can't remember the exact numbers. But it was just like, it was difficult. It was breathtaking to me, like how statistically massive her audience is. There's nowhere else for her to go. She's hit the top. The only place where she can really, quote unquote, go from here, and this is a function of patriarchy, is the fact that like she can now inhabit the role of a wife, and that is the only like way she can go, quote unquote, up from here. And you see this with other women throughout history, throughout different parts of society. It's like, even if you are more successful than the man who you are marrying and perhaps giving children to, even if you're more successful than him, even if you have more money than him, being his wife, that proximity to him can give you a new sheen of legitimacy that you could not achieve on your own. And that is a direct function of patriarchy because that's the ceiling. And so I feel like the only thing that Travis Kelce gives to Taylor, and you can see this playing out, is it gives her the credibility of being a wife. And that's sad to me because
It's so sad.
I am someone who loves weddings. I love when people get married, and that is a function of patriarchy in itself, but I'm a softie in that regard. But there's something very sad about the way in which like this woman who is the most successful musician of all time by the numbers, it's like it's viewed as this is the bigger or greater achievement in a lot of ways to what she has already accomplished, and that sucks. And it's like most Swifties I don't think view it that way at all. It's more so about like, and we've been discussing this, every brand under the sun made a post about Taylor Swift getting engaged because it's like it's seen as the most palatable corporate way to like, it's a function of patriarchy and capitalism. And so that is also sad too, because it's just like people are looking to capitalize on what this represents. And what it represents is just like the most traditional, most heteronormative way to be.
We have songs from as recently as Midnight's. We have No
Yep.
Deal, the 1950s shit they want from me, and then she is very much doing some 1950s shit they want from her. And
Yep.
we see, conservative commentators saying, "Oh, look, she's maturing, she's growing up, she's becoming a submissive housewife." And that's just really frustrating because I feel like I have such empathy for the people who are like really feeling a chafe with everything that's currently going on. I think
Yeah.
something that has been really frustrating to me that was going on during the Eras tour was, she has her final song of the night. She's singing Karma, It's
Mhm.
this song about like people getting what's coming to them, karma having her back. She's gonna go to the top. She's gonna bring all of her friends to the summit. She is performing this song like surrounded by representations of all of these previous eras of her work. She is performing on a record-breaking tour, and for a
Mhm.
lot of people, one of the biggest pieces of excitement for that final song of the night would be whether or not her boyfriend was there and whether or not she would change the song lyrics to reference him. And like on the one hand, sure, that was always a lyric referencing her boyfriend. It was originally about Joe Alwyn, and like I kind of understand updating it to make the change. And
Right.
also, it's a difference between like these old songs that referenced her relationship were kind of like these static things. She wasn't like going in and changing them to be like, and this is about my new boyfriend who's part of my brand. And so I've always thought that that was like almost so frustrating that there was something beautiful about it. How mad it would make me the way that people would focus so much on is it going to be, I think that was like a prediction question. They would guess amongst themselves, these people who are really into Travis and Taylor, like, is she gonna sing about him? And then something even more frustrating happened, and you were the one who told me this when we were on the phone
Mhm.
the other week, and I said fuck really loud when you did. But like, what's Taylor Swift's most liked Instagram post?
Engagement post.
And it's so fucking bleak. It's so fucking bleak. The amount of things that this woman has done just within the last few years.
Yeah.
The fact that it has more likes that she is marrying Football Man than it did when she got her albums back, or
Yeah.
when she finished her Eras tour, or when she had her movie release. Like it feels like such a clear just distillation of this heteronormative society that we live in, where, as you said, this is the peak. This is what maturing looks like. It
Yes.
sucks.
It does suck. And I feel like so much of this frustration also points to the tension within Taylor's work. And I think that I also have had the inclination to try to like pinpoint exactly where she stands on all of these things. And so have other people. And people have often tried to point her as like a hypocrite. And I think that the reality is, it's just so complicated, and like Taylor's songwriting will, and the things that she says publicly and the things that she does will contradict each other. But over time, I've come to see that as like, okay, that's kind of just the human condition. And
Mhm.
especially as a woman in her position, I think she's still worthy of criticism. But I also have an empathy for her that, like, she doesn't need from me, but nonetheless, I just am like, well, I think that she is grappling with the fact that, like, she does want to have a relationship and she wants to be married and she wants to have a supportive, loving partnership in life, as many people do. And she should be allowed to have those things, of course. She also, like, wants to get away from the way that everything she does is scrutinized and picked apart and she can never do anything right. And like, even the line, the only kind of girl they see is like a one night or a wife. It's like, I think I both see in the way in which she kind of like betrays some of her own ideals. Like, and then at the same time, I'm like, well, she's also growing and changing as a person. And like, I think one of the things that bothers her the most is just that like no one allows her to be human and no one allows her to just be an individual. Like, everything Taylor Swift does has an impression upon other people. And I'm sympathetic to that, but I also think that it's true, which is when you are a celebrity of her stature, which, like, again, no one has ever been Taylor Swift before. And I don't think anyone will ever be Taylor Swift again. Like, Taylor Swift is singular. And that has nothing to do with like whether you like her or don't like her or think her music is great or think that it's super overrated. Her success is what has made her so singular. And so I'm just like, she has everything, like, she has all of the resources she needs. So I don't feel bad for her, but I just feel this sense of sympathy for her in the fact that like the expectations on her are incomprehensible to me.
As much as I'm saying, like, this is so heteronormative, this sucks so much, something I know we're planning on talking about in a future video when we talk about, like, Snakegate and the deep fakes of her body and how that was also happening during the most recent presidential election. Like, this
Mhm.
is a woman who the fascist president of the United States has an obsessive hatred for. And
Yeah.
so as much as I sometimes feel frustrated with her, especially with some of the people who she is making friends with, some of the people who I'm seeing her photographed with, as frustrating as all of that is, I also do have, again, maybe a part of empathy that she doesn't really deserve, but a part of me that does feel empathetic to like, how do you make yourself safe in that
Mhm.
situation? And the way that you make yourself safe certainly would not be to come out as queer and put a target on your back.
I think that when it comes to so much of the political expectations set upon her, I'm of two minds because I have been really critical of her around politics. And I think people have every right to criticize her around politics. And I also think that, like, for example, with the deepfake stuff, people expect her to single handedly sue Twitter and Elon Musk and take down this entire system. And I'm like, even though she's one of the most powerful women in the world, no one is like powerful enough to do that.
Right.
And so what it, like if she were to try to do that, she would fail. And so you have to look at the way that she conducts herself through this lens of like harm reduction to herself and others. In that, like, I think people think that because she's Taylor Swift, she could get away with or do more than she actually can. And that is kind of the way that people look at a lot of powerful women, is they expect them to just like fix everything, even though the patriarchal system that prevents them from doing that, like, is the reason why they are experiencing all of these things as well.
I see a lot of incuriosity in responses to the Gaylor theory, to be honest. I see a lot of people really excited about getting their dunks in, really eager to make it clear that they're not engaging with the pop queen the wrong way, that they wouldn't dare imply somebody was queer unless they made it very clear, because what an unfair thing to accuse a straight woman of being. Rather than engaging with even just why queer fans of Taylor Swift might project more than they do into the catalog of a woman with multiple songs directly addressed to women by name, and with a pattern of singing lyrics from the male perspective, they just shut it down, rely on the largely media manufactured narratives around her, and call anything else ridiculous. I disagree with this not only because I don't think that much of this is fully ridiculous on a purely textual level, but also because I think it fails to understand what's kind of being longed for here. This is something I already spoke to Kat about for her piece in Spitfire, but I think there is almost this power fantasy going on here that I've honestly never really ever seen addressed elsewhere. It is not, as is often, like really often, even sometimes in my comment section about unrelated videos, some people will accuse gaylors of having a delusion that they themselves might be able to hook up with Taylor Swift if she were queer like they are. That is, to be clear, not what I think the fantasy of Gaylorism almost ever is. If you ask me, the fantasy of Gaylorism is, I think, a really reasonable response to living in a heteronormative culture. It is this daydream of this popular, beloved pop star having a thing in common with you. Not just what that might mean for her music that you have related to already, but also what it might mean in terms of the way that people would be forced to respond to that. Everybody already has an opinion on Taylor Swift, and if she were to decide that she wanted to come out, it would be absolutely no less true that everybody would have an opinion about that too. It's something a lot of people think would force a conversation, especially if, as is purported to be the case in many theories, she had somehow been dissuaded from doing so early on in her career, and she were to speak out about the reasons for that hypothetically. And I don't say that to say that I think that Taylor Swift should come out or that she would be under any obligation to do so even if she was queer. I'm just saying, if hypothetically a pop star came out during a peak of her career and while she was as popular as she ever had been, it would probably force at least some people to think about the issue of gay rights a little bit differently. It might force some people to rethink their assumption of straightness as the default. It would force some people, even some people in the fandom who are really cruel to the gaylors, to rethink some of the gleefully mean homophobic stuff they said to and about gaylors. And there is a real appeal in that, I think. There is a real appeal in this idea, not just of a gay celebrity. We have those, we treat them terribly, but of a queer celebrity that the kind of people who dislike queerness are already attached to, who, in theory, could make those people think about things differently. I'm not even speaking on whether or not I think that that's a realistic fantasy. I'm just saying it's what I think the fantasy is. Yeah, I think even part of the Gaylor fantasy sometimes leans into that, like, and Taylor will fix it for us. Like, it's this my love to the Gaylors, but a lot of them have this idea of like, and Taylor Swift would come out and a bunch of her fans who are homophobic would magically stop being homophobic. And it's like, well, the most likely scenario would be that Taylor Swift would come out and she would face like a truly unprecedented level of like homophobia directed at her. Is
Yeah.
like that would be part and parcel with any sort of like grand scale coming out. Because truly, I don't know that like Ellen DeGeneres is the only other person that pops into my head in terms of like somebody who people already knew and liked and then had to
Mhm.
reckon with her being queer. And like that was not a warm fuzzy experience for her when she came out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think with the way that the culture is right now, if Taylor Swift were to come out right now, I think it would be like I don't think it would be like, and then the world was so happy. I think it would just be like almost nightmarish in terms of the level of discourse that it would create. And I think the amount of backlash that it would create would shock people, because I think some people are very aware of sort of the current positioning around like gay rights and acceptance, but I think some people are yet to realize how far removed we are from the lover era, where you could actually capitalize on LGBTQ plus association and pride and allyship. Like, we're so far away from rainbow capitalism right now. I think that the president of the United States would probably condemn it. So
Mhm.
that's like where we are. And
Right.
that would be such a potentially like harmful environment to come out into. It's hard. It's like, and so the power fantasy, it's like with Gaylor's wanting Taylor to come out, I think that it would rest on whether she is or is not, like what her sexuality truly is, and also like what she hopes to accomplish by doing that. Also, can you imagine the discourse if she came out and was like, I'm bisexual, but I'm marrying a man?
Oh
The
my
le-
God.
the
Yeah.
level the level of, oh my god, like by the discourse around bisexual women is already so bad and biphobic and
Hmm.
horrible and heinous. It would be nuclear levels of biphobic discourse if Taylor Swift came out as bisexual, presumably now.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be like worse than the shit that JoJo Siwa gets. Like it would, yeah. And that's another thing is like I think there's constantly this idea not only of like, you have to come out and you have to like make this big grand coming out gesture of some sort. But also like you have to perform it. Like for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people, it truly would not be good enough for Taylor Swift to say, "Yeah, I'm queer. Some of my songs about women are queer." If they don't see her like right now having a relationship that they are told is explicitly romantic, they won't believe that.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And I think Jojo Siwa is a great example of like, people think that it is all sunshine and rainbows, literally. When you are a celebrity who comes out of the closet, people underestimate and purposefully downplay the amount of homophobia that there still is, let alone other phobias, transphobia, like general queer phobia. And so the amount of hate and harassment that Jojo Siwa, just as one example, received, and like, think about how much that would scale up for Taylor Swift. When JoJo Siwa came out, there were so many like parents movements to like get Nickelodeon to like pull their association with her or any of the other kids brands, because she was considered a children's entertainer. So that she got that reaction. And I've done an episode about JoJo Siwa with Matt Bernstein on A Bit Fruity, and we talk
Yes.
about this. Like, there's a whole like people going back into the closet or doing things that like we can't fully unpack, but like there's reactions to homophobia that can impact people on personal levels and also have these broader societal impacts that we have yet to truly grapple with as a society. And because of this social return to homophobia in a lot of ways, like not a return but more so just like we're seeing an influx of queer phobia again right now. And I think that is very harmful for both the individual celebrities and also everyone watching that discourse.
I think also I see where a lot of all of the sort of Gaylorism discourse gets conflated into itself and into each other. So we get to a point where any acknowledgement of like potential queerness in Taylor Swift's work or in her history is flattened into like this is all QAnon for liberal white women. This is conspiracies about how she's about to come out. And I think that that does a real disservice to what a lot of people are like, what they're wanting out of this, what they're fantasizing about, what the thought experiment is, but also just like everybody does conspiracies about Taylor Swift. Everybody was doing fucking numerology to try to figure out when Reputation Taylor's version was going to come out. They were like trying to do all of these charts to predict dates and stuff. And that was not only Gaylor's.
No, yes, you're completely right. As someone who has a lot of Swiftie friends, like all over the place, all demographics, everyone has their own conspiracy. I'll get a text from one friend in LA, like, do you think Reputation's really coming out this week? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I have no idea about that conspiracy at all. Then I have another Swiftie friend, completely different conspiracy theory about Taylor Swift. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then it's just like, Gaylor is just one slice of the pie. And that is a really frustrating misconception about Gaylor, because it's basically just like, you're taking one slice of this massive conspiratorial pie that is how Taylor Swift has actually encouraged her fans to engage with her music and her personal life since day one, and you are hyperfixating on Gaylors and acting like their behavior is abnormal and therefore more stigmatized because than what all of these other people are doing, when the only difference is that it is speculation and theorizing about Taylor Swift's relationships with women and whether she's singing about women versus men. And the example I always come back to of like, this is a game that Taylor Swift created for her fans to play is if you go back to the debut and Fearless album releases, in the physical liner is in the notes. There were capitalized letters, and they would spell out different words that symbolized real things in her real relationships, including someone's name of who she was singing about in her song. So, and you go to Torture Poets Department, she's still doing the same thing. When Torture Poets Department came out, in the Grove shopping mall in LA, an outdoor shopping mall that's really popular, she put this whole diorama, and it was like full of clues for what the album was about. So like there was a globe on the table with a pin stuck in Destin, Florida, which was then a place that she sung about on the album. So it's like Taylor Swift's brand of engaging with her fans is to encourage people to conspire together about what she's singing about. And that's the entire fandom. But Gaylor is singled out and treated as if it's some sort of aberrant, taboo thing, which is really just the reaction to the idea that a woman could be gay.
Yeah. And I think one of the other like accusations that they use that they try to like kind of cover up that it's offensive to imply somebody might be gay. But they say, they kind of pretend to take the Gaylor side and they say, well, if she is gay, then you're trying to out her, and that's really harmful for you to do, which
Mm-hmm.
feels like such a misunderstanding to me of what would be happening in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. It's like, it's not it totally just like it completely distorts what Gaylor is, because the idea behind Gaylor, whether you agree with it or not, is not we're going to catch her and expose her for being gay. The idea behind Gaylor, I feel like, that clip of Trump where he's like, and before he like starts speaking, I'm like, Gaylor is the idea that Taylor Swift has been trying to communicate through her lyricism this entire time, and that she wants people to see and understand that this is who she really is, which if you're not familiar with Taylor Swift at all, maybe that sounds kind of crazy, like the idea of it. But if you do know more about Gaylor, or about Taylor in general, you know that she has said things like this. Like she has said, like, people try to guess what my songs are about, but no one's ever truly gotten it before. And then she's like encouraged people to speculate about what the songs are about. So that part of Gaylor is true. Taylor Swift does say that there are hidden meanings in her songs and that people have yet to fully decode them. And the only thing that like Taylor, the only part that is taking you out of what we know to be true is like the speculation aspect is she's not speaking about men when she's using male pronouns, which she doesn't always, but usually when she's using male pronouns or when she's speaking about specific men, the conspiracy element is like, okay, she's not really singing about them. She's singing about women, or like some of these other songs are about women in addition to the songs about men.
Yeah, and a lot of the songs are just like on their face about women. Like
Yes.
Dorothea is just like a song about a woman. It's like a love song about a woman as far as I'm concerned. Like it's like there are so many like that.
Yes, yes. And it's like that's why there was so much discourse around the song Betty, because Taylor sings from the perspective of a boy singing about these two girls and the name James. And I'm like, now I'm gonna sound like a conspiracy
I know
theorist.
it. She always makes me feel like Charlie at the whiteboard.
I'm like, and hold on to your hats, folks, because the children in the song are named after Blake Lively's daughters. So actually, like James is a girl. But it's like it's stuff like that. And yes, of course, this is like what pop culture, more generally speaking, has kind of become, which like you see it within Swifties, but you also see it in Marvel, with Star Wars, with Disney, with every major fandom that there is. The way that fans engage with material today in particular is through fan service and through Easter eggs and through speculation. And a lot of this conversation happens online, a lot of times in places like subreddits and algorithm driven social media communities where these platforms and these algorithms actually drive extremism. So you see that politically, obviously, we all know that, but you also see fandom extremism within fandoms. And sometimes I think about that when I look at some Gaylor stuff, because of course, this falls on a broad spectrum. You have people who just kind of casually believe in Gaylor and talk about it with their friends in real life. And then you have people on Reddit who post many times a day, who spend many hours a day, like deep in Taylor wore this dress to this night of the Eras tour, which means this. And people fall all in between that wide range of a spectrum. But I think that internet extremism element has kind of helped create the perception around Gaylor today. It's just also unfairly targeting Gaylor because you see that kind of extremism within every fandom, topic, community, subculture imaginable online.
I think too, like I don't think, first of all, I think there's a difference between, people picking up on things that might be intentional flags or like, hairpin drops, as she might say.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between that and outing. And also I think that like the difference is that outing harms people. Outing is not as a result of like, okay, maybe this person who has been singing all of these songs about women is trying to tell us something, like it's a very different thing. But by calling it outing, it kind of like reframes who has any power here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think, even the people who are clocked in doing conspiracy hours, 8 hours a day on Reddit, like I don't think that they are meaningfully harming Taylor Swift. I think
Right.
like the least charitable thing that I could say about like Gaylorism, something wrong that it's doing is you could say that it kind of maybe undermines her autonomy a little bit if we're
Mm-hmm.
saying somebody's controlling her, somebody's keeping her from coming out. But also, and we've spoken about this before, but I think of that as an externalization of like just the anxieties that the queer people themselves who are projecting into this have felt about the closet and living in a heteronormative society.
I completely agree. And I also think that the outing argument, to me, just it almost always ignores a crucial fact. And I think a lot of people don't know this, but some people do. And there's no excuse for like distorting this angle of it, which is that over the past few years, whenever Gaylor has gotten a lot of attention, whether that's within the Swiftie fandom or over the past few weeks, we've seen Gaylor get literally like international attention. Whenever this happens, people who are in these Gaylor communities, they get doxxed. They get outed. When I wrote about Gaylor, I got reader mail describing really serious, dangerous situations where people in Gaylor had been harassed and targeted and doxxed and outed. There are countries where being gay is criminalized, so that can be an element to this. The moderator of the Gaylor subreddit has told me that multiple minors have been doxxed to their families. People again underestimate the levels of homophobia in society today, but one of the leading causes of child homelessness is when children get kicked out of their homes for being gay. So like there's all this harassment and like actual harm coming to people within Gaylor, and there is no harm. I'm willing to say I don't think that there has been really any harm that has been caused to Taylor Swift herself because of this. And if there was harm caused to her as a result of like an association with gay people, the root cause of that harm is homophobia, not Gaylor's being aggressive or Gaylor's being like harmful to Taylor Swift directly.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's such a good point. In terms of, people who are really invested in this, again, I do know that there are people who still think that this is part of some big grand plan. They think that there is a coming out date. They think that, the marriage itself might not happen. She might ghost. All of these things that like I don't personally find um fulfilling to fantasize about. Like that's not any of what my enjoyment of Gaylor is, even when I do dip my toes into those waters.
Mm-hmm.
I think potentially in terms of like Gaylors who might be able to inflict some sort of harm on themselves, like I do think that that's kind of the closest that I get in terms of like, okay, well they're not going to hurt Taylor by being really invested in this idea of this fantasy, but I do think, it could be rough if somebody gets really, really invested into something like that, that let's be honest, like as defensive as I am of Gaylors, is extremely unlikely to happen for
Yeah.
many of the reasons we've already discussed.
Yes. And I think I completely agree. And I think that for a lot of people who get sucked into whether it's Gaylor or Larry or another fandom conspiracy or just conspiracies in general, it is vulnerable people who often are very attracted to these ideologies. And the director, this is a like completely out of left field reference, but for anyone who's a fan of David Cronenberg, the director who makes like body horror films, he made this film, I believe last year, called The Shroud, which is about conspiracies. And he described conspiracies as a response to grief, which I thought was very interesting. He like did this in a talk about the movie, and it made me think of Gaylor, and it made me think of gay conspiracies in fandom that I've been a part of, because I think that a lot of it speaks to the grief that queer people feel of living in a homophobic society. And it's like the way he described it was, if someone close to you has died, you may fall into a conspiracy about their death because it's giving you answers and it's giving you like a narrative to believe in that rationalizes this unexplainable, horrible thing. And within Gaylor and within conspiracies about gay people in media and in celebrity, it's like the horrible, unexplainable thing is that for a lot of people, you are gay, you were born gay, you were born queer, you were born trans, you were born with this marginalized identity, and you live and are forced to live in a society that is actively hostile to your existence and is violent toward you and is unaccepting of you. And so, this conspiracy that you partake in may, especially when you see people take it to that extreme level beyond just like, I think Taylor Swift could have dated Carly Kloss, or I think this song could be about her being bisexual. When you see it go to the furthest extent that it can go, where it's like, this guy is a beard for Taylor, and they signed a contract on this date because she wore this amulet, like that kind of thing, it's like grasping for an explanation to make sense of a problem that ultimately doesn't have anything to do necessarily with your own situation, but is rather just like, this is helping me make sense of the universe. And so I have this deep sympathy for people who fall into these patterns. And I also, as like a young queer person growing up in these online spaces where this was really common, I also felt that way about the TV show Sherlock when I was like in late high school, early college.
I'm so excited to talk about Sherlock with you. Honestly, I never ended up watching like the final season of Sherlock, but I do remember, as pretty much anybody who was on Tumblr at that time. Like I was following people who shipped John and Sherlock and who were very invested in, I remember even seeing when the first few episodes of, or well, I guess it's only a few episodes because it's short British TV. But I remember when the episodes for the final season came out, people were saying like there has to be more. There has to be something else. There has to be something in a translated version.
Yes.
Um, and I never got quite deep enough to really like understand what the theory even was. But even I was kind of keeping my eye out from a distance. Like, okay, what if they're right though? Like, what if they're right and I knew because I listened?
No, for sure. And like the JohnLock conspiracy theory was so pervasive and believed in so intently by so many people that it did break containment. And I have seen people, usually on Reddit, talk about John Locke, the conspiracy. To this day, I will see people like sort of mock it and belittle it and dismiss it in exactly the same way that people talk about Gaylor. And as someone who believed in John Locke very strongly, what it was, I view it as very similar to Gaylor, because Gaylor is not quite the same as like fictional shipping, but the John Locke conspiracy was a step beyond the John Locke ship. And like people have shipped John and Sherlock. It's one of the most popular ships of all time within like fandom spaces. They're some of the most fan fiction, fan art, etc. But this theory related specifically to the TV show BBC Sherlock. And this theory was that in the show, John and Sherlock were going to end up together in a canon on screen relationship. By the end of the show, it would be written in the script that they would be in a relationship, and that was where the story was headed. And it became a conspiracy in a traditional sense because it was like people wrote thousands and thousands of words speculating, like, okay, in here are all these Easter eggs pointing to it textually. Like, here's the subtext of the show, and this is what the subtext is indicating. This is what this scene actually means. This is what this dialogue means. And they would also take it to another layer, which was like, the showrunners have said this, which means that this is going to happen. And like, we're in a kind of open dialogue with each other where they know about us and they're referencing even like the conspiracy itself on the show. And like, now that's an Easter egg. And this all, again, sounds kind of crazy until you look at it closer, because like, I do think that the show BBC Sherlock, it did talk about this relationship. It did talk about this conspiracy. And like Supernatural, also a part of Super Hulock, they did the exact same thing with Destiel. It's almost like diabolical and sick and twisted how these showrunners actually really were messing with like these fandoms. And I feel like a historian of this topic because I'm like, I was there, I lived it, I saw it all. But like, for example, Sherlock was famously really delayed in between seasons. Like, years would pass in between each season of the show. And between the second and third season of the show, that was like 2014 Tumblr when Super Hulock was at its peak and really took off. And I don't think I'm misremembering this. The end of season 2 was when Sherlock, quote unquote, died. He
Mhm.
like the end of that season ends with him like falling off of a building and everyone says he's dead, but then at the very end you see that he's still alive. And for the next 3 years or so in between the seasons, there was all this fan speculation about how did Sherlock live. And when the show came back for season 3, the first episode spends a significant amount of runtime devoted to like exploring these fan theories and making fun of the fans and like doing like fan service directly. And like, you specifically see a group of female fans who speculate that Sherlock and Moriarty kiss, and that like they like portray it in the show like they're about to start making out. So it's not exactly a direct John Locke reference, but it is referencing the queer gay part of the fandom, and it's mocking them and it's making fun of them. But fans obviously saw this as a gratification, that the showrunners saw them, that they knew what they were doing. And the show would make a lot of textual jokes about the idea that John and Sherlock had this relationship. And I think the sad thing is a lot of that was just homophobic humor. But one of the showrunners was gay. So people were like, why would a gay showrunner like lean on homophobic humor? Like, surely they're hinting at something. And so this takes us to the end of Sherlock. The John Locke conspiracy theory is at its peak. There are thousands of adherents. I'm one of them. The final episode of the show airs, and Sherlock and John do not end up in a relationship. And I remember this so vividly because I was so upset. like genuinely shattered, emotionally gone, like in shambles, crashing out. I was like, this was supposed to be the best day of my entire life. It's like this happening. And I cared so much about this and it's not happening. And so immediately within the time period, within the weeks after that episode aired, the conspiracy theory took on a really weird tilt where out of like grief and like bargaining and like trying to rationalize what had happened, we all believed that that was a fake out episode and that there was like a secret hidden episode. And this went on for a while. This went on for like a really long time. But obviously, eventually, everyone kind of had to come to terms with the fact that there was no secret episode. That was the ending of the show. It didn't help that the ending of the show sucked and like critically bombed. So it was just like, oh my God,
Maybe they should have made them gay.
Exactly. If they had made them gay, as us John Lockers predicted, it would have been a historic freaking ending to the show, and everyone probably would have been happy. But no, the show, it was really a 1-2 punch because it was like, boom, John Locke's not real. Boom, the show that you thought was so great and like so genius for hinting at this relationship, for doing this slow burn. The show actually sucked. It was just a bad show, bad writing. It was like, oh, like, that was kind of the story of John Locke for me as a participant. And the years went by and I grew up and I didn't care about it anymore. With Gaylor, you see some similarities. Like you can see some of the parallels between like what's going on in these two fandoms. But with Gaylor and with this type of conspiracy that involves like real people, there's no end in sight because there's never gonna be a series finale of Taylor Swift. There's and like Larry was the other massive, and I think Larry is also much more of a traditional conspiracy theory than Gaylor. Larry is like Larry and John Locke are both more traditional conspiracy theories. Gaylorism extends into places that I do not think are more so like conspiracy theories, but Larry is still continuing to this day as well because people still believe, and there's some crossover between more extreme Gaylor and Larry because some people believe that Harry Styles and Taylor Swift were beards for each other. You do have this persistent, never-ending belief. And I don't think that is like, I think the person that harms the most is the individual who can't move on. Because for me, I don't think being a John Locke fan actually harmed me. Yeah, I crashed out for like a few weeks in 2017, but I was also crashing out because Trump was the president.
Right. There was a lot going on.
There's a lot going on and a lot of reasons to be crashing out. So apart from like that flight of fancy, it didn't harm me in any way. It didn't harm anyone involved in the making of Sherlock. I think I could see how if like I had never been given the opportunity to like move on and mature. And also like for me personally, I was closeted at that time. Later on in life, I came out. So I didn't really need like this kind of like worldview thing to keep me going as much. But I do worry for some people just because I want the best for them and I have so much sympathy for them. And I think that there's like probably a healthy way to engage with some of even the more extreme conspiracy stuff. And then there's probably an unhealthy way to engage with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I think Sherlock, much like we've already discussed with Taylor Swift, it did set the audience up to want to solve a puzzle and make these connections. And it like
Yes.
it lends itself so well to being something where people would have been really excited about the idea of a big reveal or a rug pull or something that had been going on all along. Much
Yes.
like, the idea that it's kind of the ultimate Easter egg that you could be uncovering for Taylor is that she's actually been flagging this whole time. Like it makes so much sense, and it also makes so much sense that it could just go way too far. And I've
Yes.
even myself, in Mean Girls when Katie is like, I could feel myself getting annoying. Like I feel that way about Gaylor and about Taylor Swift all the time. Like I can feel myself getting annoying. Like there's just so many things. And so like I know that my brain, I also know, and I'll just say, my brain catches on this a lot more when I am not taking my antidepressants regularly. Like, there have been periods in my life where I have kind of gone off of my antidepressants, I've gone really into Gaylor, and then I start taking my meds again, and I'm like, this is not fun. I don't know why the Wellbutrin just makes it so that I cannot care about Carly Kloss anymore.
I think I feel this way about a lot of fandom stuff. And like, growing up, fandom was so important to me. And as you can see, like, fandom is still important to my identity. And as an adult, I often am thinking in a very like meta sense, like my relationship to fandom, like how it makes me feel throughout different periods of time in my life. And I think that at times where I'm like searching for something, those are times when I will engage more deeply with fandom. And
Yeah.
I think that that is like, I think a lot of this, Gaylor and Larry and all of these things, it's like a product of modern living because fandoms have become more important to people and media has relied more on fan service and Easter eggs because as like an artist or a musician or a showrunner or anything today, if you're trying to build a loyal following, you need something in addition to just being like good. Because there's a million good TV shows out there. So you need to build a loyal audience that you can also profit from. You need an extra thing beyond just like it's good. And you can also do this with something that's not good. You can
Right.
take like a bad quality show and you can give it this like loyal decades of fan base that will shell out thousands of dollars for to meet the stars or do whatever by simply relying on fan service and making fans feel involved. And that sort of like, it's like you see it with parasocial relationships, you see it with Easter eggs, you see it with like fan conventions. It's like the more that the showrunner or the artist or the celebrity can make you feel like you actually know them and therefore you have stake in what's happening, the more profitable and popular it will become. And so like with Taylor Swift, she like literally she's been called the ringmaster of fan service because her career and her success in large part is because of how well she can do this. She is so good at this. It's almost eerie to me because in my like research and time reporting and writing about Taylor Swift, you go all the way back to her early MySpace posts when she was just a teenager and she was already so good. Her MySpace posts, she was already so good at doing this. She would write these posts that were like intensely relatable and she would tread the line so well of being like, I'm going to talk about myself and you're like on my page. So you like have this like kind of closeness to me. And also like you are my fan and I love my fans and I do everything for my fans. And she literally would write like my fans are my favorite people when she was like 16, 17. And I don't think that's manipulative. I think that is like Taylor Swift is a woman who grew up in this environment and learned to like dominate this environment. And I honestly give it to her credit that she's so good at this because a lot of people look at it almost like it's like a trick or like a manipulation tactic. But I think it's just media savviness. And when a woman is very savvy, people are like, burn the witch, burn her. Like, how could she? Why do young girls love her so much? And it's like, because she sings about things that are relevant to them and like forges a relationship with them. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, Taylor Swift will always fascinate me on so many different levels. And she does that for a lot of people, clearly. But it's just like, I think people don't give her enough credit for just how like maybe they do, but I'm just like, she's so smart, she's so savvy, and like she just had it figured out so early on in her career.
Yeah. Another thing I always think of with like her getting that closeness with her fans is like when she would send fucking care packages to people who followed her on Tumblr and like cookies that she made with Carly Kloss, which another
Yes,
reason why everybody was very convinced that was a romantic relationship.
it's so genius. It blows my mind when she did those care packages to Tumblr, to people on Tumblr. There was a girl, like a friend of a friend, who got one of those care packages in my high school. And I remember this so vividly. I wasn't even a huge Taylor fan at the time. But of course, everyone was talking about how cool it was that Sarah got a care package from Taylor Swift for her Taylor Swift Tumblr account. Imagine if there was probably a Sarah in every like municipality in America. Like Taylor Swift is so smart. That marketing is genius. And I just think that like, yeah, it boggles the mind. And it's just like, I don't get how other people don't see how it was just like inevitable that you would get Gaylor and that you would get all these different like sort of expressions of Swiftie fandom because this woman is like single-handedly one of the greatest marketers of a generation. Like building a personal brand, etc.
Even spaces that aren't setting their audience up for an Easter egg hunt get contingents of fans who are interested primarily in pulling out the bits of songs they can relate to or that they can twist until they can relate to. While I've always remained on the fringes of any Swiftie spaces, a fandom I have participated in much more heavily was these private shitposting groups on Facebook about a band called the Mountain Goats. John Darnielle sings about a lot of things. He, like Taylor, actually does a lot of narrative songs with fictional characters, a lot of less than biographical stuff, and also some deeply personal stuff sprinkled throughout the catalog. He, like Taylor, has a huge and sprawling discography and puts out albums at least every couple of years. John Darnielle is a straight Christian cis man. He has a lot of queer and trans and religiously traumatized fans, people who are much younger, who might relate to the lyrics about addiction or religion, but also who often find ways to twist them, to find themselves and their experiences of gender or of being gay reflected in these songs that aren't actually about that. And I really don't like thinking about think pieces being written or rocks being lifted to shine a light on those fans and point at them and say, wrong, you are enjoying it wrong. That feels mean spirited, homophobic, and transphobic, and like a misunderstanding of what that sort of interpretation actually does. It doesn't take anything away from what it was originally intended to be for people to intentionally read something else into it. That's kind of just what art is and what it's supposed to be, and it's weird, again, specifically to be mad at the queer people about this. The first video I ever made was about the Bechdel-Wallace test, how a comic strip by a lesbian got co-opted into some measure of pop feminism that its creator never intended for it to be, how it originally existed as a representation of the loneliness inherent in the experience of being a lesbian in a culture that very rarely reflects that back to you. Like, the joke of the comic, of the original Bechdel test comic, is that one lesbian hasn't been able to go to the movies since she saw Alien because she has a rule for herself that she only watches movies where there are more than one woman and they talk to each other about something other than a man. And this has been co-opted into a weird, flimsy measure that we pretend to judge media by. It was never actually meant to be a strict set of rules for life. Alison Bechdel is a cartoonist. It was a joke, a reference to something her friend Liz Wallace had said, a commentary on being isolated and how different a world that is less centered around men can feel sometimes when it's the one you still live in and everybody else is still male-centered in the same culture. In a way, I kind of almost conceive of Gaylorism or other thought experiments like it, like the JohnLock Conspiracy, as the other side of what we see in that cartoon, where the character in the original comic strip had decided to sort of recuse herself from popular culture. Something like Gaylorism is a subversion and almost a reclamation, a way to participate in something culturally huge and textually rich, and to see yourself in it even if you have to force the mirror. I think it's kind of sad that people refuse to see that as something cool or subversive, and they insist on laughing along with our oppressors at how delusional those people must be.
Yes, I agree. I mean, as a child of Tumblr, I believe very strongly, or I believe very strongly that representation in media, in mainstream mass popular media, matters deeply. And it is important not just on a personal level, but on a societal level. That, like, what we see playing out on our screens and what we see playing out, who we see rewarded in society, that has a real significant impact for individuals who see themselves reflected in that person and in terms of like normalizing and just like social progress in this country. So much of it is because of how mass media and mainstream media was forced to embrace the identities of marginalized people. And as much hate as the internet gets, the internet has been a massive force in like just this absolute reckoning that, like, if everyone can have a platform, you're going to see a lot more diversity and you're going to see a lot more like desire for that representation at all levels of society.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add about, particularly, I think about like this narrative that the Gaylors are all crashing out as a result of this proposal? Because it feels like that went everywhere, and I didn't really see any crash outs. Like, I saw the things that people were sharing and circulating and saying this is a crash out, but like even among the Gaylors who I follow, I saw some like, I mean, even I was kind of laughing because I've had, as you know, a really busy last couple of weeks, ever since Taylor got engaged. And I was like, I do think it's really funny if people think that I'm less online because I'm like having some Gaylor crash out and like pulling all the curtains down in my room. That has not been what's going on because I haven't seen anybody really like having a Gaylor crash out. And I wanted to ask if that's something you've seen or if you've just seen people talking about it.
I've literally just seen people talking about it. And a lot of those posts that went viral were not real. They were real in the sense that someone went on Reddit and posted them. But it's like, this is kind of part of media literacy that even a lot of like seasoned reporters or people who are extremely online don't necessarily have media literacy, social media literacy, because when you create a brand new account on Reddit, it's like name hyphen name bunch of numbers.
Hmm.
A lot of those accounts, those viral screenshots of Gaylors crashing out, were coming from accounts that were like name dash name bunch of numbers. That means those accounts were just created. And the more you know about fandom and Gaylor, the more you know that like within Swifties, there are, I don't even know what to call them, rabble rousers
Hmm.
who
Hmm.
like try to inflame negative sentiment against Gaylors, like Stan Wars. You have anti-Gaylors who try to make Gaylors look bad by making up things that they think it would make a Gaylor look bad to say, posting it, screenshotting it, disseminating it on the internet. So a lot of these Gaylor crash outs were actually just disinformation. And I remember I was talking about this with some journalists who were great, who were like, why would people do that? And I'm like, because fandom is its own spectrum. Like fandom is its own little world. And there are people it becomes so central to people's identities and activities. And like, so of course there's an anti-Gaylor, there's like Gaylor snark subreddits for snarking about Gaylor, there's like Twitter accounts for like worst of Gaylor. So like, of course people do stuff like this. That just, when you are familiar with fandom territory, you start to recognize these things. And so there was a lot of disinformation around the Gaylor crash outs. I also think that like whenever a woman or a girl or someone who's sort of like viewed through a female lens, whenever you're just being silly, it's like, this woman is crazy, haul her off to
Hmm.
the asylum, she isn't like she's insane. Meanwhile, to bring it back to football, when men flip cars, grease light poles, slide down them, like that is fine. That is just like, they're not crashing out or because their home team lost or won. They're just celebrating, they're just reacting. But when women are like doing anything with their fandom, it's like, these crazy women will be the downfall of society. So I think you see a lot of that stigma and perception with Gaylors. And the last thing I'll say is, one of the things that has stuck with me from interviewing Gaylors is like, people underestimate how much of a social cultural component there is to this, that results from a lack of like IRL spaces for queer women, and also education for queer women. And what I mean by that is like, lesbian bars have been shuttering around the world. And in the US, there are fewer places for queer women to hang out with one another and socialize in real life. And the downside of gay bars and queer bars has always been that like, you need to be 21, you need to be an adult, you need
Yeah.
to not be sober to partake in these social activities. So for a lot of people, Gaylor is kind of just like a social club for queer women who listen to Taylor Swift. And within that social club, like, people don't just talk about Gaylor. They don't just speculate about her relationships. They talk about their day-to-day lives. They talk about being closeted or not. They talk about politics. They talk about what they watch on TV. It's just a community. And for a lot of people, it's great. It's an amazing way to socialize and express themselves, and also to learn about queer history and to learn to recognize symbols. Even if Taylor Swift isn't talking about the lavender panic, or even if Taylor Swift's hairpin drop is not a reference to queer media and like queer celebrity throughout the ages, women are learning about these things because of Gaylor. And I think that's really cool. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, leave Gaylor alone.
Yes.
That's my final message.
Absolutely. That's how I feel too. When you called me a fellow Gaylor sympathizer in your Spitfire piece, I was like kicking my feet. I loved that.
That piece, it's always interesting to me like what resonates with readers and how. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I thought people might be mad at me for writing about Gaylor. I thought I might get like hate mail. So there are so many Gaylors out there. Like so many people responded to me and were like, long time reader, like first time caller, but I love Gaylor. And I was like, that is awesome. And it
I'm
doesn't
so
surprise
glad.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so nice. Yeah. Well, obviously as we can see on your sign behind you, if anybody wants to find more from you, they can find you on Spitfire, right?
Yes, spitfirenews.com is my newsletter. It's free to subscribe.
Absolutely. And I hope everybody does subscribe. I am constantly, anytime you put something out, I read it right away in my phone. I usually read it in my phone and then also open it up on my computer and read it on my computer. I am like constantly, I'm there. I'm logged in.
That
I
means so
love your
much to
work so
me.
much. I really appreciate you coming on to talk about this.
Oh my
Nobody else
gosh.
I would have rather spoken about Gaylor with.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun as always. And likewise, I'm such a huge fan of everything you do.
Now, in closing, I think that there's a world of difference between insisting that you know somebody's sexuality better than they do. Like, that JoJo Siwa became magically straight by way of having a boyfriend because everybody made a bunch of thumbnails with fake tweets of her claiming to be straight, and nobody seems to be concerned about how shady that is because it generates clicks. There's a difference between that and just allowing space for the possibility of queerness. I think the backlash against Gaylorism is happening not because of whatever crashouts Zach Swiftologist couldn't tell came from an obvious throwaway account, but from an internalized homophobia, a feeling of shame for the idea that you might take and twist and claim something and be the wrong sort of queer, a feeling of frustration with the idea that somebody else is enjoying the pop queen wrong and making you look bad. I find this especially frustrating when, for a lot of people, women in particular, Taylor Swift, because of her excellent branding, has become sort of understood as this avatar for the so-called female experience in general. I saw posts after her engagement circling that were like, check on the women in your life, this is a big deal for them. I saw poetry about Taylor Swift, apparently formerly some unloved, unpicked woman who had finally been chosen, and how every woman was so happy to see that happen. I saw these same exact channels that made shorts mocking Gaylors for crashing out and informing them that they didn't actually know anything about Taylor, making videos where they gushed about how Travis Kelce changed everything, and clearly they know a bunch about that relationship. I did not see discourse about the straight women who got Tavis engagement-themed manicures. I did not see discourse from anybody other than Gaylors about anybody who insisted Taylor Swift is retiring to have babies. To be parasocially invested in the heteronormative relationship is to be normal, to be mature, to have the correct opinions, and to enjoy Taylor Swift the correct way. And the way that they treat Gaylors truly makes it feel as though they think being queer is a bad thing to be if you don't do it in exactly the most respectable way. It's okay for Carly Rae Jepsen to be a queer icon, for gay men to love her music and relate to her, but that is not allowed for Taylor. Taylor is straight. Everybody will tell you over and over again, Taylor Swift is the straightest woman they've ever seen. And yeah, with the wives and girlfriends bullshit lately I talked about with Kat, I do understand that inclination a tiny bit, but it really requires you to toss out a lot of context that the people more invested in this than you have already found. Next time you are suggested a post of a Gaylor crash out or some delusional queer woman on the internet, I want you to first consider whether or not you are looking at an obvious fucking bait post. Second, I want you to consider what the person putting it in front of you is even trying to accomplish, and whether or not they're being fair about trying to accomplish that with straight people too, or if their sights are particularly on the queer women they mean to control and mock. And you do need to think about that even if the people who are doing this shit are queer, because a lot of queer people love to engage in this intersection of homophobia and misogyny because they get away with it, and a lot of them do it because they think they can somehow impress our oppressors, be understood as a respectable and respectful gay person who deserves to be there. And then, you know, if somebody is really truly telling you about Gaylorism and they're not doing it as a way to mock a bunch of women who aren't really doing anything wrong, I need you to really, really consider something. How is that hurting anybody? Why are you being a cop? Why are you being a cop? Legally, you're required to tell me why you're being a cop right now. Why are you, maybe even sometimes as people who pretend not to care about Taylor Swift, conscripting yourself into a fandom war between her straight and gay fans on the side of homophobia? Why would you not just stay out of it? Why would you not just say, I'm not really into that, or that's not how I see her music? Why must it be a personality trait that you know the correct way to enjoy music and the queer women who enjoy it in a different way are doing it wrong? As I've said before in this video, I don't currently consider myself to be somebody who cares very much about Taylor Swift's romantic attachments or like her public events and outings. If I'm being extremely honest, a lot of my enjoyment of the songs I can twist a queer reading out of changed as I got into Chapel Roan, as I listened to other gay artists, something many gaylors also do. I see lots of people say, gaylors should just listen to actually queer artists. Babe, they do! They do! It was gaylors who I saw being concerned about Lil Nas X. It was gaylors who I saw being reasonable about Chapel Roan not wanting to take pictures with strangers all the time or have herself and her family stalked or needing to cancel tour dates for mental health. It was gaylors who I saw defending Sabrina from accusations of setting back feminism, so it's also not that it's only just one woman they like. Just a lot of the things people say about gaylors are simply not true, insisting they exist as some hive mind. They all act in the way those throwaway Reddit account posts frame them as acting. That the Taylor Swift you're gay and that's final tweet wasn't an obvious fucking troll post. I respect your intelligence less if you couldn't tell that. People also love to say that gaylors are biphobic and they don't believe in bisexuality, even though a lot of gaylors do in fact hold space for Taylor to be attracted to multiple genders. And honestly, I think the ones who are projecting onto her as a full lesbian are probably doing that for personal self-understanding reasons that I'm not all that interested in dunking on either. We're also underestimating the interiority of people who are just desperate to see Taylor be in on a plan, in on the joke of what a massive subversion of her lyric, in your life you'll do things greater than dating the boy on the football team with this relationship would be if this were all some grand plan, some performance art, as some people theorize. And I kind of find myself somewhere in the middle, because I do sometimes feel like all of this with this fiance is so overwhelming that she has to be trying to prove a point, but I don't know what that point is. I wouldn't claim the whole point is the relationship is fake and you're an idiot, but it does feel like our faces are being rubbed into this cultural celebration of heteronormativity happening about the Taylor and Travis relationship. I think plenty of people who don't even think she's queer have had that feeling about the showmance of it all at some point or another over the last few years, and I don't think that's a crash out. I think the real crash out is the misogyny slop about how dare women queer a narrative. The real crash out is the feeling that you have won because a woman got engaged to a man and you are now a morally superior Taylor Swift enjoyer to anyone who might have had complicated feelings about seeing that happen. The real crash out is pretending like you personally don't have at least one thing that you enjoy in a way that most other people don't understand, and pretending like you would not love a chance to talk to other people who feel the same way. I love subverting Taylor Swift's music. I love the songs about women that I don't feel I even have to subvert, but I do this subversion thing with many artists, everyone I listen to. I do this with Billy Joel. I want a lesbian cover of Uptown Girl so bad. Am I crashing out? Is it a crash out to think that Uptown Girl would be a lesbian banger? The queering of narratives is good. Things that help you build relationships with other gay and queer people are good. Things that help you connect to your history, learn references, connect with artists who are queer and out, those are good things. I don't think Gaylorism is some harmful delusion that's causing any damage to anybody, perpetrating biphobia somehow. I think Gaylorism is kind of like a bold feminist reimagining of a cultural narrative that pretty much none of us have been given a chance to opt out of. I don't care how funny you think it is to joke about the involuntary institutionalization of the women who enjoy doing that. I think they're doing something cool. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much again to Kat for being part of this and for her wonderful article about this in Spitfire. Thank you also to Balessa for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check the link in the description below if you're interested in our giveaway. And thank you also to my lovely Patreon supporters and channel members. I have an hour-long cut of my call with Kat up over on the Patreon. You get a couple extra videos from me a month over there, and it's a great way to help support me financially. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me on Patreon by becoming a channel member or by sending super thanks or super chats, one-time donations on my coffee. All of that is so helpful. I love being able to do this for my job. I'll be back soon. I love you very much.